Sometimes the smallest mistake can spark the deadliest storm. From a tiny cut in South Africa that drew a great white and killed 6 swimmers, to a marriage proposal turned nightmare in the Maldives. From a tiger shark slamming a marine biologist to a cage diving disaster in Gansbai. From night fishing gone horribly wrong in Durban to a crash survivor fighting off oceanic white-tip sharks, these stories show how quickly calm seas can turn into killing grounds. Watch till the end because survival here is decided in seconds. On August 9, 2025, the ocean off Gansbai, South Africa, stretched wide and blue under the morning sun. A group of 8 close friends had planned this outing for weeks, eager to enjoy the freedom of the sea and the calm rhythm of paddling together. They were all in their 20s, with a mix of different backgrounds and interests, but they shared a love of the outdoors. Some worked in offices, some in trades, and one was a student studying marine science. Together they had taken trips before, but this was the first time they ventured so far out with kayaks tied side by side in open water. Among them was Daniel, the most adventurous of the group, who often pushed everyone to try new challenges. There was also Mira, who loved photography and carried a waterproof camera to capture the day. Jacob and Elena were a couple who had joined because they valued time away from the busy city. Others, like Andre and Sophia, were quieter but enjoyed the sense of community these trips brought. By mid-morning, they had anchored their small crafts and slipped into the cool water, staying close together as they laughed and floated on their backs. They were careful not to make too much commotion, aware that this coast was known for predators. Their voices carried lightly across the swells, broken only by splashes from their arms as they swam near the kayaks. For a while, everything was peaceful, the ocean surface calm with only the distant crash of waves against the rocks. But while climbing back onto one of the kayaks, Jacob scraped his foot against a sharp edge of rock hidden just below the waterline. It was only a small cut, something so minor he almost ignored it. A few drops of blood seeped into the current, spreading quietly through the water. The others did not notice, still laughing and talking as they floated in the circle. Beneath them, however, the faint trail carried through the sea. A great white, massive and silent, was already cruising nearby. The scent reached it like a signal, sharpening its focus and pulling it closer with every powerful stroke of its tail. From the surface, the swimmers saw nothing unusual, but the shadow below grew larger, circling with increasing intensity. Suddenly, the water erupted. The shark surged upward with terrifying speed, clamping onto Jacob with devastating force. He was pulled under in an instant, the water exploding into foam and red spray. Shouts filled the air as the group scattered, panic breaking their tight circle. Kayaks flipped, paddles dropped, and the once calm sea became a scene of chaos. The predator returned again and again, its massive body cutting through the water as it lunged at the group. Boards split apart, swimmers thrashed in fear, and waves of blood and bubbles spread across the surface. In the violent confusion, only Andre and Mira managed to cling to overturned kayaks and kick toward the distant shore. The rest faced the full fury of the sea's most feared hunter. The survivors clung desperately to the overturned kayaks, waves carrying them slowly toward the rocky shoreline. Their arms shook from exhaustion, their lungs burned from panic, and behind them, the sea was still marked by broken gear, floating paddles, and the spreading red stain. The silence that followed was almost worse than the attack itself. The predator had vanished, leaving behind only fragments of what had once been a joyful outing. As they crawled onto the rocks, cuts and bruises lined their bodies from scraping against the jagged edges. Their chests heaved as they collapsed in shock, staring back at the vast water that had moments before swallowed their friends. Nothing but scattered kayaks bobbing in the swell remained. Rescue crews arrived soon after, alerted by frantic signals from fishermen who had seen the chaos from a distance. Boats rushed across the waves, crews pulling in the overturned crafts, but their search brought only fragments of wetsuits and shattered paddles. Authorities worked tirelessly into the evening, but 6 lives had already been taken in just a few minutes of horror. The coast, usually buzzing with tourists and divers, fell quiet. Locals gathered in disbelief as news spread. They were no strangers to the presence of predators in these waters, but the sheer scale and speed of this tragedy shook the entire community. Experts later explained that even a small amount of blood in the water could trigger the hunting instincts of a great white. The minor injury that had seemed so harmless on the surface had, in fact, been enough to draw the predator from the depths. It was not recklessness or carelessness that had doomed the group, but the unpredictability of the sea itself. Families of the lost arrived in grief, staring out across the waves where the attack had unfolded. Flowers were placed near the shoreline, drifting away with the tide as a sign of remembrance. For the survivors, the memory of that morning would remain forever etched in their minds. What had begun as laughter among friends had turned into one of the darkest days the coast had ever witnessed. The ocean settled again, calm and endless. But for those who had seen the violence, its beauty was forever shadowed by the reminder of how quickly it could turn deadly. The waves that once promised peace now whispered of danger, carrying with them echoes of the struggle. To the witnesses, every crest and swell would forever hold the memory of survival and loss. On July 19, 2023, the turquoise waters of the Maldives shimmered under the warm sunlight, a setting that seemed perfect for a memory that would last a lifetime. Mark Ellis, a 30-year-old graphic designer from London, had spent weeks preparing a surprise for his longtime partner. Known among friends as a thoughtful and adventurous man, Mark had always believed that love should be celebrated in extraordinary ways. His girlfriend Emily shared his passion for travel and had often joined him in exploring hidden beaches and remote dive spots across the world. For both of them, the ocean was a place of beauty and escape. Mark had arranged a snorkeling trip that morning, concealing his plan from Emily. In his waterproof case, carefully hidden, he carried a small velvet box containing the ring he had chosen for her. He intended to kneel on the seabed, open the box, and create a proposal that would be as unique as their shared story. Their guide, along with a few dive staff, accompanied them, ensuring safety as they swam across the shallow reef where schools of fish flickered like silver sparks in the sunlight. As the couple descended into the water, Emily brought a small underwater camera, ready to capture what she thought would be simple holiday memories. Mark gestured for her to follow him toward a sandy clearing between coral heads, a calm place where his plan could unfold. He dropped to one knee on the soft seabed, bubbles rising around him, as he carefully opened the box and held it outward. Emily aimed the camera with excitement, her eyes widening behind her mask. But beauty and danger can collide without warning. From the edge of the reef, a sandbar shark, sleek and measuring nearly 2.5 meters, approached with unsettling speed. Drawn by the flashes of baitfish and sudden movement, it turned its powerful body toward the unusual scene. Mark's outstretched hand, pale against the swirling silver fish, caught the predator's focus. In a blur, the shark lunged, its sharp teeth slashed across Mark's forearm, leaving a deep, bloody gash. Pain surged through him as the ring box slipped from his grip, drifting upward with the current. Blood spread quickly into the clear water, a red cloud against the soft blue. Emily kicked backward in terror, the camera still clutched tightly as the shark circled again. The animal's nose bumped against their legs and fins, testing, while they thrashed and kicked toward the boat above. Panic filled every second as the creature darted close, the power of its body felt with every brush. Dive staff reacted instantly, lowering themselves and dragging the struggling pair upward. Just as the predator twisted for another lunge, they hauled Mark and Emily over the side. The water calmed behind them, but the romance of the moment was shattered. The proposal had turned into chaos. The ring was lost, and the dream was torn apart in seconds. Mark lay sprawled across the deck, his arm wrapped hastily in towels as staff pressed down to slow the heavy bleeding. His skin was pale, his eyes wide with shock, as Emily clutched his other hand, trembling. The gash along his forearm was deep, torn open by the predator's sudden strike, each pulse of blood a reminder of how close the scene had come to disaster. The boat sped toward shore, its engine roaring over the silent fear of everyone aboard. The blue water, so calm only minutes before, now seemed like a place of menace. At the dock, paramedics rushed to meet them, swiftly transferring Mark onto a stretcher. Emily followed close behind, her body still shaking, her mind replaying the moment when the shark had burst through the serene reef. Medical workers worked with urgency, wrapping his wound tightly, starting fluids, and checking his vital signs. Every movement was fast and precise, yet every second still felt too slow. News of the strange and terrifying attack spread quickly through the island. Staff who had witnessed it whispered among themselves, shaken by the thought that such a shallow, clear water site could become the scene of such chaos. Guests who had earlier smiled and prepared for ordinary snorkeling now watched with uneasy silence, their faces tense as the ambulance doors shut. At the hospital, Mark was stabilized. Surgeons cleaned and stitched the wound, 40 tight sutures holding together the shredded skin and tissue. The pain was sharp, but survival brought relief. For Emily, the image of the ring box drifting away remained etched in her memory, a symbol of how quickly joy had turned into terror. What should have been a moment of celebration had become a lesson in how fragile human plans are when set against the raw instincts of the wild. Experts later explained that sandbar sharks were not usually aggressive toward humans. But quick movements, flashing objects, and baitfish could easily trigger mistakes. The glitter of the school around the reef and Mark's reaching hand had created the perfect storm of confusion. The couple remained together through the ordeal, yet both carried scars beyond the physical. The ocean they once adored had revealed its darker side. Though Mark healed, the story of that day stayed with them, a warning that even the most magical settings can hold danger just beneath the surface. Each return to the shore was met with a quiet hesitation, a reminder of how fragile joy could be. In their silence, they carried an unspoken pact to never forget the cost of survival. On April 12, 2025, the waters off Heron Island glistened under the mid-morning sun. Marine biologist Sophie Grant, 31 years old, was deep into her research season, collecting coral samples as part of a long-term reef health project. She had always been passionate about the ocean, her fascination with marine ecosystems beginning in childhood when she first snorkeled with her parents along the Great Barrier Reef. Over the years, her curiosity grew into a career, one that brought her to some of the most remote and beautiful locations on Earth. Calm and disciplined, she was respected by her peers not only for her scientific skills but also for her confidence in the water. That morning, she and her dive partner anchored their small boat near a patch of reef known for its vibrant coral. The sea was unusually clear, light beams piercing the depths and illuminating the sand below. Equipped with scuba gear, she descended slowly, collecting fragments of coral and carefully placing them in her sample container. It was a routine she had followed many times before, the kind of quiet underwater work that felt both methodical and peaceful. The surface above rippled gently, but beneath something powerful was shifting. A 4.2-meter tiger shark, broad and striped, drifted silently into view. Its large frame glided with an ease that seemed almost deceptive. Sophie noticed the shadow first, the elongated shape circling with calculated patience. Her pulse quickened, and she steadied herself, watching as the predator moved around her in wide arcs before sliding back into the blue void below. For a few moments, the water seemed still again, but that calm carried an unnerving weight. Without warning, the predator launched upward. It surged from beneath with explosive force, striking directly into her body. The impact ripped the regulator from her mouth, bubbles rushing upward as she spun in the surge. Disoriented, she tried to regain balance, but the shark turned with terrifying precision. In a flash, its jaws clamped down on her calf, thrashing violently side to side. Pain shot through her leg as blood clouded the water, the predator's raw power pulling her in jagged bursts. Her dive partner reacted instantly, seizing her harness and dragging her upward with desperate force. The shark circled again, turning sharply as it lunged once more. Its teeth grazed his fin as he swung a heavy camera housing against its snout, creating a brief distraction. The predator recoiled, but only for seconds before circling back again with intent. The divers kicked upward in a frenzy, each second stretching into what felt like eternity. They broke the surface together, gasping as waves churned around them, foam and blood mixing in the water. The boat was only meters away, but the striped figure rose beneath them once more, bumping the hull as they scrambled to climb aboard. Every movement felt like a race against the predator's relentless persistence. Sophie collapsed onto the deck as her partner hauled her out of the water, her leg bleeding heavily and her breath shallow from the struggle. The shark's massive body lingered below, circling and nudging the boat with unsettling persistence, before finally sliding back into the depths. The crew wasted no time, grabbing bandages and towels to wrap around her injured calf, trying to slow the steady flow of blood. The deck, once scattered with research gear, became a frantic space of first aid and urgency. Her wetsuit was cut open, revealing deep punctures and torn muscle where the predator had clamped down. Each movement sent waves of pain through her, but she stayed conscious, clinging to the edge of awareness as her partner reassured her with gestures and swift actions. The boat sped toward shore, the engine straining as spray and foam trailed behind. Every second felt critical. Each wave they crossed a reminder of how quickly calm waters could turn into chaos. By the time they reached the dock, emergency responders were waiting. Sophie was lifted onto a stretcher, her face pale yet determined, eyes fixed on the sky above. Medics worked swiftly, securing her leg, giving fluids, and preparing her for the ambulance ride that would take her to the nearest hospital. Crowds had gathered, their expressions etched with shock as word of the event spread through the small island community. Later, doctors confirmed that while the wounds were severe, the quick actions of her partner had prevented the loss of her leg. Surgery was required to repair the torn tissue, and recovery would be long and painful, but she had survived what could have easily been fatal. Her Her colleagues described the attack as a chilling reminder of the risks of working in the open sea, even in familiar areas where safety was often assumed. News of the event reached beyond the island, sparking renewed discussions about tiger-shark behavior and the unpredictable nature of encounters with apex predators. For Sophie, the attack left more than scars. It left a lasting memory of the thin line between research and survival. The reef she had studied for years, once a place of wonder, would forever be tied to the day when the ocean revealed its raw and unforgiving power. On September 14, 2021, Daniel and Laura Myers, a young couple from California, arrived in South Africa for what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. Recently engaged, they had chosen to celebrate their milestone with a journey full of excitement, a trip that combined sightseeing, hiking, and above all, their shared love for the ocean. Both had always been fascinated by marine life. Daniel, who worked as a fitness coach, had grown up surfing along the Pacific coast, while Laura, a graphic designer, had spent summers swimming and snorkeling in warm tropical waters. Together, they dreamed of experiencing sharks up close, not from behind a screen or in an aquarium, but in their natural element. That morning, they joined a cage diving expedition off the famous coast of Gansbai. Known as one of the best locations in the world to see great white sharks, the waters promised both beauty and danger. The sea was calm, sunlight cutting through the clear surface, and the sounds of seabirds carried across the air. Other tourists were filled with anticipation as the boat anchored near a seal colony, where predators often patrolled. Daniel and Laura suited up, their excitement growing as they lowered themselves into the steel cage that hung alongside the vessel. At first, the experience felt surreal. Schools of fish darted through the water, and the couple pointed in awe as curious seals swam nearby, gliding with ease in the open blue. The visibility was remarkable, and through the shifting light they caught sight of a faint shadow below. A great white, immense and silent, circled with deliberate movements, its massive body contrasting with the stillness of the sea. The moment was thrilling, but it shifted quickly. From the depths, the predator surged upward with terrifying force. Its head slammed against the bars of the cage, the steel shuddering under the weight of the impact. The sound echoed through the water and bubbles erupted in a sudden rush. Before they could recover from the shock, the shark struck again, ramming the frame so violently that the metal bent inward. Panic rose as another lunge forced its snout through a gap in the cage. Daniel reacted instinctively, pushing Laura back against the far side of the frame. The predator's jaws snapped down on his forearm, teeth tearing into flesh as the water clouded with red. He struggled against its violent thrashing, but the sheer power of the animal dragged his arm against the cage with crushing force. Laura screamed through her regulator, trying to stay clear, but the predator twisted again, its head turning toward her. In a brutal lunge, it clamped onto her thigh, jerking her sideways as the cage spun in the current. Above, the winch cables strained, snapping under the sudden pressure as crew members shouted desperately from the deck. The cage rolled as the great white pulled and twisted, its immense power testing the limits of both steel and human endurance. The cage twisted violently as the predator forced its weight against the frame, metal grinding under the immense pressure. Daniel clung to the bars with his free hand while pain coursed through his torn arm, the water around him swirling with blood. Laura, shaken and gasping, tried to keep her leg away from the snapping jaws, but the thrashing dragged her hard against the steel. Crew members fought frantically with the winch system, hauling with all their strength as the cables strained and snapped in the chaos. With a final surge, the shark wrenched at the cage one last time before retreating into the deep, its massive body fading into the blue. The battered frame spun as it was pulled upward, spilling bubbles in its wake. Daniel and Laura, bruised and bleeding, clutched the bars until they finally broke the surface. Hands reached down, dragging them onto the deck of the boat. The scene was frantic. Tourists stood frozen, pale with fear, while the crew rushed forward with first aid. Towels and bandages were pressed against wounds, their injuries severe but not fatal. Daniel's forearm was shredded and swollen, while Laura's thigh bore deep gashes. Both trembled under the weight of shock, their wetsuits torn and stained. Around them, scattered fins and broken gear floated on the surface, reminders of the violence that had unfolded below. The return to shore was heavy with silence. Every face carried the memory of the attack, the sound of steel twisting, and the image of the great white forcing its head into the cage burned into their minds. Medics were waiting on land, immediately loading the injured onto stretchers and rushing them to hospital care. News spread quickly, reaching locals who had long lived with the knowledge that these waters were predator territory. Marine experts later confirmed the attack as one of the rarest kinds, a full breach of a reinforced cage. They explained that even with strong engineering, The power of a shark exceeding 5 meters could bend steel. For Daniel and Laura, the near-fatal encounter turned what had begun as a celebration of life into a memory of raw survival. Though alive, the scars they carried served as lasting proof of the ocean's unforgiving force, a reminder that even controlled encounters could turn deadly in a matter of seconds. On August 19, 2024, the waters off Durban lay dark and still beneath the faint glow of moonlight. 3 brothers, known for their shared love of fishing and family traditions, anchored their small skiff a short distance from the shore. They had grown up near the coastline, spending countless weekends with rods and nets, turning simple outings into lifelong memories. Their father had taught them how to tie lines, handle boats, and read the rhythm of the sea, and they carried those lessons into adulthood, finding comfort in the rituals of night fishing. That evening was special. The local community held a friendly competition, and the brothers decided to join, testing their skills in the calm waters that had so often given them bountiful catches. They carried with them bait buckets, lines, and the easy confidence of experience. To improve their chances, they used a common tactic: dangling fish remains over the edge to draw predators closer. It was a simple trick, one passed down through generations, but on this night it would set in motion a chain of terrifying events. The sea around them was deceptively quiet, disturbed only by ripples from their lines and the faint hum of insects drifting from the shore. The brothers shared tasks with ease, one steadying the lantern, another working the reels, while the youngest leaned over the side to adjust a hooked line. His hand brushed against the cool water, unaware of the looming danger beneath the surface. Out of the black depths, a shadow rose fast and silent. In a sudden eruption, a 3-meter dusky shark surged upward, breaking the water with terrifying power. Its jaws clamped onto the young man's shoulder, jerking him forward so violently that his body slammed against the boat's side. The shock tore through the skiff, rattling the boards and splintering parts of the railing. His scream mixed with the splash as he was dragged halfway into the sea. The other 2 reacted instantly, throwing themselves toward him, grabbing his legs as the predator thrashed. The skiff rocked violently under the combined force of the shark, pulling down, and the brothers pulling back. Fishing rods snapped, lines tangled around their arms, and hooks scattered across the deck as chaos unfolded. Water sprayed across their faces while blood darkened the sea around them, drifting in red clouds beneath the hull. The dusky shark shook its prey with bone-jarring force, snapping its head side to side. Each lunge tore at flesh, shredding muscle as it tried to wrench him fully into the depths. The brothers clung desperately, their grips cutting into their palms, refusing to let go as the predator rammed the hull with sudden bursts of power. The skiff groaned under the impact, wooden planks splintering where the predator struck. For long, terrible moments, it was a contest of strength. The sea boiled with spray, the boat tilted dangerously, and the outcome seemed inevitable. Yet with one last coordinated heave, they wrenched him free of the predator's hold, collapsing together on the bloodied deck. The predator circled beneath, ramming once more before slipping into the dark water, leaving only the wreckage of gear, shredded wood, and the trembling breaths of the brothers. The 3 brothers lay on the slick deck, their chests heaving as they tried to catch their breath. The youngest writhed in pain, blood still spilling from the deep gashes across his shoulder and upper arm. The torn flesh glistened in the lantern light, every movement sending new waves of agony through his body. His shirt was shredded, soaked through with red, and the salt water only worsened the sting. His brothers tore strips from old clothes and fishing towels, pressing them against the wounds in a desperate attempt to slow the flow. The deck that had once held buckets and reels was now covered in blood, scattered hooks, and broken wood. The dusky shark had vanished into the depths, but its presence lingered. Every ripple of water against the skiff made them fear another sudden strike. The thought of the predator circling below haunted them, forcing them to keep their eyes fixed on the black surface. The boat rocked gently now, but each creak of wood carried with it the memory of the violent collision from minutes before. The sea that had always been their comfort now felt hostile and cruel. The injured brother grew pale, his face drained of color. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and his eyes fluttered as exhaustion set in. His siblings worked quickly, binding his wounds tighter and propping him against the side of the boat to keep him upright. Their hands shook, slick with salt and blood, but they pressed on with a grim determination born from fear and loyalty. With the predator gone, the brothers turned their focus to escape. They cut the anchor line free, not caring about the competition or the gear left behind. The small engine roared to life, louder than usual in the silence of the night, and the skiff lurched forward. Spray from the waves mixed with sweat and tears as they pushed the boat toward shore with everything the engine could give. Each jolt of the hull against the waves threatened to reopen the wounds, but the urgency of reaching land kept them moving. As the coastline appeared faintly in the distance, the lantern light flickered over their strained faces. The oldest kept the engine steady, while the other pressed harder against the makeshift bandages, whispering silent prayers that help would come in time. The injured brother's breath was faint but steady, his body weak but clinging to life. When they finally reached the dock, shouts rang out as other fishermen and locals rushed to meet them. Hands reached over the edge, lifting the wounded man carefully onto the pier, where emergency responders took over. He was whisked away on a stretcher, his brothers following close behind, their clothes stained and their minds still replaying the horror of what had unfolded. In the days that followed, the story spread quickly. The attack was spoken of with both fear and awe, a chilling reminder of what could lurk just beneath the surface. The brothers had entered the water seeking sport and tradition, but they left with scars that would last a lifetime. The youngest survived after surgeries and long hours in the hospital, but the memory of the predator's power was carved into his body and mind forever. The dusky shark had struck without warning, and the lesson it left behind was clear. In the silent dark of night, even the most ordinary fishing trip could turn into a desperate fight for survival. On June 14, 2019, Jack Harrison, a 34-year-old pilot, lifted a private helicopter from Nassau, setting course toward St. Lucia. Flying had always been his greatest passion, a skill he had trained for from his early 20s. He was known among his peers for his calm demeanor and ability to manage pressure, having logged countless hours across the Caribbean skies. When he was not in the cockpit, he often spent time near the sea, fascinated by its vast beauty, though he carried little thought of what dangers might linger beneath. The flight was routine, a simple ferry trip with no passengers, only him, the machine, and the long stretch of blue horizon. For most of the morning, conditions were smooth. The sunlight reflected across the open water like glass, and the engine's steady hum filled the small cabin. But as Jack neared the halfway mark, a sudden mechanical failure changed everything. Warning lights flashed, and the rotor lost rhythm. He fought to stabilize the aircraft, guiding it lower, but the machine lurched violently and dropped toward the waves. The impact shattered the calm with a thunderous crash. Water surged through the broken cabin, dragging him sideways. Training took over as he forced open a panel and escaped the sinking wreck. Clinging to a floating seat cushion, Jack pulled free of the debris, gasping under the weight of shock and exhaustion. Minor cuts and bruises burned against the salt water, but he was alive. With a life vest strapped tight, he steadied himself and scanned the horizon. There was no sign of land, no other boats, only endless sea stretching under the glaring sun. He knew rescue could take hours, maybe longer. Time passed slowly. The sun seared his skin and the waves tossed him like driftwood. He kept his mind focused, recalling survival lessons from years of training, conserving energy, and keeping his breathing calm. But then the sea around him began to shift. Shadows moved beneath the surface, sleek dorsal fins slicing through the water with unnerving precision. Oceanic white-tip sharks, large and powerful, drawn by the crashed debris and the faint trace of blood from his cuts, had arrived. At first they circled with slow, deliberate motions. One brushed against his leg, its rough skin scraping like sandpaper. Another glided close enough that he felt its powerful tail surge the water against his body. He kicked lightly to keep them at a distance, but he knew these predators thrived on patience, testing their prey before deciding to strike. The silence of the vast ocean made their presence more chilling. The first attack came suddenly. A powerful bite clamped around his calf, sharp teeth slicing through flesh as he was dragged below. Panic and pain shot through him as he thrashed violently, kicking against the predator's side until it released him. He broke the surface, gasping for air, blood spreading in a dark cloud around his body. Before he could steady himself, another predator struck. This time jaws closed around his shoulder, pulling him under with bone-rattling force. His chest burned as he fought against the crushing grip, clawing at the water, trying to break free. With one desperate shove of his free arm and frantic kicks, he twisted free, bursting upward once again. The sea boiled with motion. The fins circled tighter now, their presence inescapable, and Jack screamed into the empty horizon, struggling to stay afloat as the predators prepared for another pass. The water foamed around Jack as the oceanic white-tip shark circled with renewed intent. His limbs ached, blood loss weakening him, yet he forced his body to stay upright. Every second stretched as he tried to keep his head above the waves, heart pounding in his chest. The sea had turned hostile, every shadow and ripple a reminder that he was no longer alone in this vast expanse. The predators tested him with brushes and lunges, their white-tipped fins cutting across the surface like blades. Each pass threatened to be the last, and the taste of salt and iron filled his mouth as he swallowed mouthfuls of water. Jack's training as a pilot had prepared him for emergencies, but nothing could truly prepare him for the unpredictability of these apex predators. His focus sharpened into survival instinct alone. He kicked feebly at the water to keep the circling fins at bay, though his calf throbbed from the earlier bite and his shoulder burned with every movement. The sea around him was stained with red, drifting outward in a widening cloud that only heightened the interest of the circling shapes. Then from above, a distant sound cut through the chaos. The faint hum of rotors grew louder, building into a steady thunder. Jack lifted his eyes toward the sky, spotting the dark silhouette of a rescue helicopter closing in. Relief washed over him, though it was mixed with terror, for the sharks had not relented. As the machine hovered, waves churned violently beneath its blades, drawing the predators closer in the confusion. One shark surged upward, colliding with Jack's side and spinning him into the surf. He coughed seawater, vision blurring, body trembling from shock. A cable dropped from the chopper, swaying above the waves as a rescuer was lowered swiftly. The crew worked with practiced speed, maneuvering toward him as the sharks pressed tighter around his position. The rescuer reached Jack in seconds that felt like hours, wrapping an arm around him and signaling for the winch. The sea boiled again as one of the white tips darted close, brushing against Jack's dangling legs as he was pulled upward. Foam sprayed as the hoist reeled them in, the predators circling below with flashes of pale underbellies glinting in the downwash. Finally, his body cleared the surface, rising out of reach of the snapping jaws. On board the helicopter, crew members rushed to stabilize him. His clothes were shredded, his skin torn and bloodied, his face pale and drained of strength. They pressed bandages over the deep wounds, securing his calf and shoulder while one kept his airway clear as he drifted in and out of consciousness. The rotor noise filled the cabin, drowning out all else. But Jack's faint breathing remained steady. Hours later, he was delivered to a hospital where surgeons worked quickly to close the severe lacerations and treat the blood loss. His survival was described as miraculous, given the ferocity of the encounter and the remoteness of his location. Yet even as his body was stitched and stabilized, the memory of the circling fins and the crushing bites carved deep into his mind. In the aftermath, news of the incident spread quickly. Reports detailed the rare but deadly nature of oceanic white-tip sharks, known for following shipwrecks and circling survivors with unnerving patience. Experts emphasized that Jack's ordeal mirrored the dangers faced by sailors in past wars, where these sharks had earned a reputation as relentless hunters of stranded crews. For Jack, the sea he once admired had been forever changed. He continued his recovery with determination, though scars lined his body as reminders of how close he had come to death. The helicopter crash had been one disaster, but the real test had come in the form of the silent predators that ruled the open water. His story became a warning repeated across diving and aviation communities. In the blue wilderness of the ocean, survival was never guaranteed, and even moments of calm could be shattered in an instant by the raw force of nature's most efficient hunters.